thank you to Ray for organising. Thanks for Matt for obviously kindly agreeing to do the session tonight, but also to you guys as grassroots volunteers for joining us tonight. Just wanted to sort of my role really just to paint a little picture about where futsal fits in the grand scheme of things really. It sort of shows my age and how long I've been involved. That futsal's been introduced in the county for well over 10 years now, and originally that sort of introduction was to assist with the growth of girls football, to actually act as a retention tool. So that has really served us well over the years as a growth exercise and as another sort of opportunity for people to learn and kids to learn a new game and a new challenge. It has evolved over the years to assist more sort of entry level mini soccer, under 7s through to under 10s. Girls football predominantly was at one point all the way through to under 16s, which again provided an excellent opportunity for the growth of the girls game across the county. But also making sure that we could actually have some regular access to futsal activity through some of the sort of worst periods in the county of the weather that we have, unfortunately. Sometimes we do get an odd period where we just can't play any football, and where futsal has been introduced, we've seen more games being played potentially indoors than we have outdoors in some years, which has proven to be, again, an excellent way of keeping people playing through some of the worst months of the year. But we also recognise that there has been sort of technical benefits as well. Helps to expose young players in particular to different ways to learn the game, for them to be challenged, but in an environment where it is dry, it is free from the driving rain and wind or the ice and snow, whichever sort of challenges at the time. But it is in an environment where people can stay relatively warm and free from issues during those particular winter months when young players in particular can struggle in the outdoor environment. And what we've seen is a direct link to the growth and the retention actually of girls football and mini soccer over the years in particular. What I would say, and I know Matt's going to touch on a lot of the stuff in terms of the sort of the overall headlines, is that the rules around futsal have had to be adapted by local leagues over the years. We recognise that, and that's been driven more around venue availability, timings, number of teams, age groups, some of the constraints that we actually have, and we've come up with solutions to keep people playing the game, like I say, in those periods of the season. And as we go through tonight, if there are sort of specific questions linked to your specific league, then we would obviously advise that you do speak to your league reps, but we might be able to cover the answers to those questions in tonight's presentation as well. And I think the overall success of where we've seen futsal over the last 10 years in particular that I know of is that now it is a standard offer across our youth leagues, particularly for entry level football, which is in Carlisle, in West Cumbria, in Penrith, which is something that I think we are proud of, and I think it's an important part of the programme each season. So on that note, I will hand over to Matt's very capable hands and his presentation, and I will put myself on mute, Ray, and let Matt crack on. Hope you all enjoy.
Amazing. Thank you both, Craig and Ray. Great to be here and aware that you guys are volunteering your time to be here tonight. So really appreciate your curiosity to be here and learn more about this game of futsal. And also I think you guys are lucky, to have a county FA that, from what I've seen, is so integrated and supportive of the leagues, and everyone seems like they're singing off the same hymn sheet. It's quite refreshing down here in Manchester. I think it's there's lots of different leagues doing different things, and so it's great to see quite a united approach up there, and the opportunity for these young players of yours to be able to enjoy the different constraints and challenges that futsal provides. So tonight, oh great, they're putting up their teams, and just feel free, please, during the presentation as we get into it, pop up any questions in the chat, but also it'll be very much discussion based, where for a large chunk of tonight, we'll look at some of the different constraints and or laws of the game, and then in little breakout rooms of probably 3, go away for a few minutes, have a little chat about what differences you think or see or think would happen, and then we'll bring it back in to summarize. It's very much about your context and your players and the outcomes for them. So first, there is a little video. Let's see, because this is where technical glitches come, but we'll see if that plays all right. Right, I just wanted to throw up that visual first. Sorry, Craig, it seems like the volume, you were the only one that maybe it didn't work for, but hopefully the rest do. They all pretty much said how just amazing futsal is. No, I'm joking, but they were, just talking through different benefits from the players and the coaches' point of view. And it's interesting in that some of the different coaches there, some were very much grassroots, some it was filmed during a UEFA B futsal course. But also at the end, Kingy is a guy who's coached in the Man United Boys Academy for the last few years from a futsal background. So he's, through the kind of specificity of futsal and learning about that, he's now doing it at a very high level within football and for football. So, like I said, rough structure for tonight, the laws of the game, but really what's interesting for me is your guys' thoughts and understanding and questions around what those constraints mean for your players. And the fact is there will be differences, so that's where the discussions are interesting. And same as within coaching, when we can, when we change the constraints of a task or an activity, the constraints mean that we might see more of one thing and less of the other. And sometimes for some players that might be more or less challenging. It might mean that some players enjoy better success at it, and I'd argue that maybe the players that don't enjoy it as much at the start, because it might bring out their development points a bit more. They probably need it the most and can grow and learn the most from it. So it's up to us to create a good environment to help them to do that. And then finally off that and during it too, I hope that some of those discussions will come up about how as coaches and the people leading these opportunities and experiences for our young people, the differences of the futsal environment and how that might change or considerations for how we coach. All pretty much covered. Like I said, just questions, feel free to throw them in as we go. We have little breakout rooms as we go just to talk about the different constraints and what you already think or want to ask and discuss. And as stated before about the cameras. So just briefly, a bit of context and how it is in some different parts around the world. So it's almost played a lot more in the non-English speaking world. So in Asia and South America, across a lot of Europe. So as some brief examples, in Brazil, in amateur and also in professional clubs, they only play it up to 10, sometimes a little bit older, before they progress into football. And in saying that, there's still a professional futsal pathway. Whereas in Spain and Portugal, it's separate. So for example, in Spain, you can either register to be a futsal player or a football player. So if you register to be a futsal player, then you're training 2 or 3 times a week and you're competing on the weekend against other futsal or futsal football clubs in that sport. And then from season to season, if players want to change, they can. That's all the way up to the top with, Barcelona are a multi-sports club. So Barcelona have a basketball team and they've got a futsal team. So they've got a futsal academy from 10s up to, I think it's 16s, 19s, and then a B team. And then they've got a fully professional futsal team of futsal players. So it's different around the world, but I think what's common in a lot of those countries is that schools, often with outdoor courts and better weather, they've got futsal goals on there. So the knowledge and awareness of it just as normal in the schools is a lot higher than what we're used to here, which is different versions of indoor football or what we think of when we think of five-a-side. So we'll find out about some of those differences hopefully tonight. But yeah, it's interesting that there's no one way to do it. It's very different in different contexts, but it is a lot more normal, I guess, in a lot of a lot of other countries. And obviously you can almost visualize looking at those badges, the type and the style of those players. And so it's interesting considering some of the environments and cultures they grow up playing in. And there's, of course, lots of examples of top players from Ronaldinho and that Nike ad way back when interspersed clips of him playing futsal as a kid to football now, or Cristiano Ronaldo. You know, it's quite endless. Players in those environments, it's quite normal that they've played futsal and enjoy it and talk about it in their development. So yeah, I think it's good to see that recreationally sometimes, because of the area in Asia, a full-size 11-a-side grass pitch is probably more valuable and harder to come by. So sometimes, because of the context, there's more of these type of spaces available to play. And equally, I think it's almost a misconception sometimes that to be competitive and play teams and have scores and have clubs, that's a different environment as well. So maybe sometimes we'll think of 1v1 tricky expressive play. That probably happens more over to the left in recreational when kids are playing on the street or by themselves. And hopefully that comes out a little bit tonight as well when we have a referee there and we've got parents who want the best for our kids and maybe supporting enthusiastically from the side. Essentially, it's the same game with same constraints, but I would argue that the outcomes of the experience for players would be very different from the left when it's recreational with their friends mucking about to when we have a scoreboard and it's all becomes a lot more official and sometimes adult-led. And then down to the bottom where, again, overseas, there's a professional pathway and there's FIFA Futsal World Cups and it's its own little world up the top for those that want to explore it. So this is the top level really of the constraints of futsal and what makes it futsal. I think it's important, like was said earlier by Craig, that your context and the different venues and where you are, you know, along the journey of creating this environment, it may be that there's some localized rules that tweak. So I'll talk about generally how futsal is played, but obviously how you do it in the league, there might be tweaks for good reasons. And I think it is valid that just like 11-a-side football, we don't apply to 8-year-olds. I think it's natural that there might be some age-specific tweaks as well. But those are sort of 5 high-level basics. So the goal is a 3x2. There's some little pesky laws of the game around kicking and keepers and things that we can discuss. The playing area itself and playing to lines as opposed to off the walls. The ball obviously smaller and heavier, and then the hard surface compared to, for example, a 3G outside. If we were to think 5v5 and a 3G outside, how is futsal different? Because if it wasn't different, then then small-sided games would be enough. But hopefully we'll see that because of these constraints, futsal is quite specific with the outcomes and challenges for our players. So the first one is the goals on the left. Hopefully, not hopefully, but I would assume that might be more familiar to most of us, especially growing up in what a sports hall and 5-a-side with 3G indoors might have looked like. So a really low goal with really wide corners compared to a 3x2, which is obviously a lot more narrow and there's a bit more height as well. So the question really is, compared to that letterbox goal with what we might be used to in a sports hall, or like I said, if there's 3G, let Mike in as well, what difference might that goal make to, so don't just think of shooting in isolation, because the game is quite rare that, especially in a condensed area like in futsal, it's quite rare that a shot is just open space like we might do in warm-up sometimes, just one against the goalkeeper. Often the context of the game is a lot messier. So have a think, and then we'll split up into groups to discuss for a few minutes and then bring it back. What difference do you think the size of the goal might make to how we can create and successfully convert goal scoring opportunities? It might be worth, I don't know whether to mention or not, if some of us are used to 5-a-side versions where you're not allowed in the goalkeeper area. in futsal we are, which is more realistic and relevant to football. So if you want to bring that in to discuss the differences of that, feel free to. But yeah, that's the question. How might that change how we create and maybe the areas that we can successfully score goals from? So let us see how I go with these breakout rooms, and I already wonder if I had it earlier. 1 second as you're there. Ray, can you see it easily from your screen at all?
Nothing coming up just yet.
As in how to. I think it's in the.
Yeah, it's from the top. I'll be honest, I've never done it before. It says automatically teams will assign 4 to 5 people to each room.
Yeah, and what subheading are you in for that? Because I found my way there when I was testing.
Just rooms at the top. So it might be that because I've set up the meeting, it's only me who can do it.
Do you want to have a crack at just split into 3 rooms and just randomly do it? It doesn't matter, and we'll have 3 to 5 minutes to discuss, and then we can bring it back in, and one person from each can bounce around. I do that. The 4-second recount, is that something that you guys are roughly familiar with, or is that something you've not heard about before? Having a time limit of 4 seconds for restart.
Yeah, how strict the refs with that? Obviously, 6-year-old and 7-year-old kids to get the ball back in 4 seconds sometimes can be quite difficult.
I think overall with that question, and a similar one came in before, is that especially for young ones and especially if they're new, just be kind and help them. You know, referees should be helping educate them, so they're not trying to catch them out and catch them getting it wrong. Yeah, so I don't think there's anything wrong with obviously talking them through it, and often in games that's done visibly and vocally as well. Sorry, these lights are a bit funny. So if the refs count in the air and verbally help them through it, it helps. But yeah, especially if it's new to the children, then we've got to help them, right? It's not there to just blow a whistle and punish them, and shame's a strong word, but I think it's relevant in this game because of the constraints, and they're quite ruthless. If you lose possession of the ball, then often you'll concede a goal scoring opportunity. So I think the way we are with that environment has got to be quite deliberate and positive, because we're putting them in a quite an intense environment where mistakes are more visible, I would argue, sometimes than football. So being positive and supporting them is more important than catching up mistakes. Do we know anyone who's had experience in the leagues before? If it's something that is roughly had a go with, or if it's something you haven't heard of, then that's okay too. I'll bring up the chat. Unread messages. What have we got? Yes, but don't fully implement. Yeah, and that's, like I said, I think it's okay to be understanding as well. And maybe with I don't know, more experience together, if it was implemented more. But yeah, I'm understanding of the fact that it can seem counterproductive if it means that the ref's blown his whistle more, and football's had enough talking about referees interfering and stopping things recently. And what's important for the implementation of it is that the defending team should be 5 meters back on a big court, so maybe you adapt that to 3 or 4 meters roughly on a netball typical size court, because the person taking the kick in or the corner obviously has the right, but the defender's not just stood in front blocking or stopping that. So then that's a yeah, it's a bit more for the ref to look after and ask for the defending team to be back that 4 or 5 meters before counting. Cool. No, it exists, but a bit more lenient. That's fine. How do you think generally then, if there is a time constraint given, no matter how lenient that is, how might that change things for A, the person on the ball, and for B, the other players on the court? So feel free to either pop in the chat or either put your hand up or just jump in if that's easier too. So how do you think that?
It could force panic, but also improve. You're dealing with like those kind of stressful situations as well, to give you more reaction to these like really instant moments on the pitch. So
yeah,
it could improve that kind of thing.
Yeah,
or worsen it.
Yeah, but I really like how you phrase that, because I think it's important to this concept in general, right? This is a new or different experiences for them. And I know there's hesitation or concern raised in one of the questions too about, it's a lot to give these young players who are trying to learn the rules and how to play football, and then we're throwing them inside and saying do different things. But you're right, so it might be quite stressful and they're forced to make a decision. But if they do, and we support them to be positive about that challenge and try and see it as room for growth, or to see things differently or do things differently, then the second word you said is that they might improve. So I think it's important that if we did what we've always done, the old phrase, you'll get what you've always got. So by throwing at them different challenges and environments, we're going to get different outcomes to what would be used to. And that doesn't mean that, for example, with a typical one is that the sole of the foot might be more efficient or useful indoor. That doesn't mean that they use the sole of the foot every time in indoor or outdoor, but it's another tool in the locker with either their technical skills or their perception and decision making. So I think you're right, it might be slightly stressful for them. So if that's the person on the ball, what do you think they would need to consider for the other 3 players and the goalkeeper? What kind of things could we help them with to solve that?
Sorry, you're right, Neil. Sorry, I was just going to say it's good to encourage them to find space and move about, try and create some space for the person who's kicking it in. It's trying to get that in training so they can implement it into a game.
Yeah, it's important, isn't it? And not only in the kicking, but obviously generally when we're in possession of the ball. And the obvious ones is to stretch high in the length of the court and width. But I think sometimes what's neglected, especially, was not just instinctually, we think, I've got to run away from the ball to make space. But actually, for players under pressure on the ball, especially in open play, if they're near their own net and under pressure, it's very difficult for them to play forward. So that support or that space, the angle needs to come. Often in futsal, it's called a safe pass. So in line or even under the ball is sometimes the only option. So yeah, dead right. As long as they're thinking about space and the passing angles, even more so, then that's going to help them more than players running away and hiding. But again, that's why the game's beautiful, because those players that are brave and want to come and help the ball will get more of it. We try and get our team to be quick, but we find if they try to go too quickly, they're not allowing the ball to be still. Yeah, that's a tricky one, isn't it, with the rules that the ball should be nice and still first. And it's I don't know, sometimes it's a good habit just to put it down with your hand so it's clear to the ref as well when that kind of kick-in process starts. But yeah, if they can be mindful of putting it down and placing it still enough quickly, then hopefully they can go and play fast. Communication, exactly right, and maybe that's the player on the ball asking for help or where they need it as well. And Paul says the same, so that's a nice outcome that may not be so obvious, but that's a challenge that they need to solve. Great. We'll bounce along to the next one. For what would normally be a throw-in in football, what are you familiar with having a kick-in general for that? And then the same for the keeper clearance. Either just pop in the chat if you're used to a throw-in football or a kick-in in futsal.
I think that is a rule that's applied universally across the county, I believe.
Yeah, great. Yeah, because these things are confusing for players, aren't they? Whoops. Because they're getting used to throw-ins, especially at those young ages, outdoor. So what does that mean then for, especially if some of those words there were fast restarts and playing quickly? What's the benefit or the different outcome of having the restart from the ground as a kick-in instead of a throw-in, do you think? Yeah, kick-ins from the sideline, that is it.
I think probably a kick-in's easier because it's easier for the boys to control. Sometimes if it's a throw-in, it's bouncing on in obviously a regular football game. It's harder for a 6 or 7-year-old to control the ball when it's bouncing coming towards them. So if it's kicked in, generally it's on the floor. So I think it's probably easier for them to control in one touch.
Yeah, exactly right. And then obviously the space is even tighter, so they would have had to do that a lot quicker in futsal, and then it's less likely to, they've got the ball under control to be able to play. Teammates need to be close enough to receive the pass. Agree with that, with the kind of, I guess, within the balance of opening up the space in the court as well. So if all 3 players come to try and show short for the ball, then it's probably going to really condense it and have a lot of defenders around too. What is the rule with own goals being scored from kick-in? If a player scores direct towards the goal, player kicks in towards goal and defender knocks it in their own net. Cool. I think that, so like in football, you can't score direct from a throw-in into, the attacking net. So it's the same that with a kick-in, you can't score direct from a kick-in, which therefore means that an own goal can't be scored, so it would be a goal kick. However, if you're saying that a defender knocks it into their own net, if that defender wasn't the person who kicked it in, then it would be a goal. So I assume that would happen from an attempted pass back to the goalkeeper. It's possibly the only way I could see that happening. Let me know if that answers your question or not.
Hiya, sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, what I mean is if like an attacker kicks it in and they kick it towards the goal, and I know you obviously can't score if it goes directly in, but if it comes off a defender or off a goalkeeper, is that goal allowed? I know it, obviously, I suppose by the letter of the law it is, but under 10s, under 7s, is it, do you give the goal or do you just say no?
I think I misinterpreted when you said own goals. You're meaning the attacking goal.
Yeah, so you're trying to score a goal and you just basically kick it towards the goal with the hope that your player gets a touch on it. But what if it's the defender that gets the touch on it?
The same might happen with that example before about trying to create a goal scoring opportunity. If we get the ball wide and we have cutbacks or it goes to back post, if the defender's in the way trying to stop it, then it might well be that their touch directs it into the net. So as hard as it might be for the young ones to concede a goal like that, within the laws or the rules, then it's allowed and it's a goal. But I guess that comes back to creating that positive environment for them that, hopefully they don't feel, too much shame for it. But yeah, it would be allowed. It just needs a second touch. So some might be a little bit cheeky and have a touch from that kick in, and then another player close by step in to blast it across to the back post and see if they get a touch off it. I'd argue the players will get better if they're trying to construct things a bit more meaningful in possession as well. Hopefully that answers that okay.
Matt, quick question: if the goalkeeper's got the ball ready to throw it in, does the other team need to be in their own half, or is?
I think there's some localized. Ray, feel free to jump in. I think there's some localized considerations and age group considerations when often there are these retreat lines. Ray, I'll let you jump in.
Yeah, so I believe, and if Craig's still on, he might be able to confirm, but I think the retreat line is played. But yeah, again, that's a league specific one. I can see Craig sort of unmuted.
Yeah. So basically, there has been variances where retreat line has continued, because that has been something that the kids are already in the habit of. So they, believe it or not, they actually naturally retreat. Because they're in that habit, and the coaches are doing a great job with it, obviously with the outdoor fixtures and getting them into that habit. So that has felt like almost a bit of a natural transfer into the futsal environment as well. But the same rule applies in terms of, if the goalkeeper wants to play quickly, there's no restriction on goalkeepers playing quickly if they wish, because that's part of it anyway. So, the chips fall as they do. If say the keeper loses the ball as a result of playing quickly, that's all added into the mix of the sort of the game, really. So yeah, there's no real change in that sense from the outdoor fixtures. Hope that helps.
Does that then mean that the keeper must distribute it into their own half, that it can't go over into the opposition half on the full?
Well, it becomes a choice, Matt. So what we want to make sure is that the keeper retains choice, and that is obviously key to sort of young goalkeepers learning how to sort of have that role. So if they decide to go long or go short, it's entirely up to them.
Yeah, great. Great. We'll bounce to the next one unless anyone's got any more on that. So yeah, the keeper clearance is from the hand, so roll or a throw. 5 fouls per team half in the real official game, where there's 20-minute halves of a stop clock. So actually that often leads to about 35 to 40 minutes. So I assume you'd be rolling clock just for practicality of having games back to back. I don't know what, but there might be 15-20-minute halves of rolling clock. Do you guys have a foul restriction in general, or there may not be a need for it, to be fair? I can see if you type in. So in general, it's a restriction on per team if the fouls are counted. That's okay. That you don't. I've never heard of this. That's great, because then it means that it's not a problem. So just in the in the official game, when there's a stop clock, so the halves are a bit longer. Once a team's committed 5 fouls, after the 5th there would be penalties rewarded, just to keep the game cleaner. But obviously the game doesn't need to be, which is good. Sharon, do you want to jump in on that?
We use it in the Carlisle Glass League. However, I think last season the referees weren't giving any free kicks at all, but we have asked them to make sure that they're giving free kicks, because the feedback we've got is that some teams are deliberately taking out other players. So we're like, no, you have to stop them doing that by giving free kicks against them, and then hopefully we won't ever have to get to a penalty.
Yeah, that's the purpose of it. So if it is by that league, if they've got that as a restriction, which it sounds like they might, then hopefully it can be more consistently applied, or you can feed that back through your league, that it is. But yeah, I think Gaz popped in, I can't see it now, and he's right, that's another thing for a ref. So if you've only got one referee, it's another thing to count. But I guess in the same, that if the scores are either on a scoreboard, or if you're writing them down yeah, it would be another thing to write down also after a foul, because it's certainly for my head, it's too much information for my little head to keep track of during a game if I was refereeing. So next, keeper pass back again. I think I've seen this mentioned that you potentially know about this, or just, yeah, either pop in the chat or jump in. Is that some hands up from Craig?
Yeah, Matt, it was just basically on the last point around the sort of variances in terms of refereeing. That it was just to point out that ultimately sometimes you've got maybe referees, official referees doing some of these games, but you've also then got coaches doing it. So the variances in terms of how that's managed, etc., is sometimes quite tricky, as Gary's already pointed out. So keeping track of that, I suppose the one thing is that making sure that, regardless of totting up fouls, that actually, fouls are given, as Sharon says. If fouls are warranted, then they're warranted, and that's sort of the main message, especially at that under 7, under 8 age where most of the futsal's being played.
Yeah, and I guess if there's any confusion, just have the conversation before the game so that both teams and the referee are aware of what the aims are in those areas. Then yeah, it's a lot easier to talk about it before than during if there's going to be misconceptions or confusion. Louise, do you want to jump in?
Oh yeah, it was just around the goalkeeper pass back. It's a rule that I really don't like. Obviously outdoors we try to pass back to the goalkeeper and get them as part of the defence, and playing out with the feet and things. And then when we go indoors and you're like, oh, you can't control it. It's something that we don't use in the West Cumbria Youth League, but I have seen it in futsal when my oldest son's been playing for an actual futsal team.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just don't like it in the youth league. I don't like it.
Yeah, so I guess there's a good example, isn't it, of when it's different. So then the outcomes are different, and so it's not that they can't touch it at all. They can do it once per team possession. So if it's the goal clearance, then they can't have it back. But if it's I don't know, if the play started from a kick in, then they can receive it once, and they've got 4 seconds to use it. So that means they'd have to be more deliberate and careful with how they use the pass back to the keeper and how the keeper distributes it. But then yeah, the outcome or the challenge is more so then for the other 4 players to help the person on the ball, because if the keeper's not there as an outlet every time, and in that tight space, it's almost playing with 5 against 4. So if we're individually marking and the goalkeeper's always there, so yeah, it's not right or wrong. Those are just the different outcomes. So the outcome for playing the goalkeeper pass back, as in the laws of the game, is that then the other players have got a much bigger problem to solve with playing out from the back, which means that they're going to have to be really aware when there's pressure on the ball that someone else needs to come back and show for a safe pass. But yeah, the trade-off will mean that the keeper, well, I guess we could say they would play or receive it less with their feet, but also because it's a tight space and there's only 4 outfielders, maybe over a game they would receive it more.
I just think it's really the opposite. It's the opposite of what we do outdoors. It's we encourage the keeper to get involved and not just stand still and save. But then when you go indoors, so we don't actually implement it in the I don't in our futsal, but I do know that it is the rule. But yeah,
like I say, it's the balance of trade-offs and the outcomes of that, and it's not that they can't touch it at all. They'll just have to be a lot more deliberate and careful about when the other players choose to pass it back, and then what they do with those 4 seconds, which might be encouraging them to play forward quicker, because they won't be able to just live on possession and bounce it back and forth to keep the ball. So at the higher end of, I don't know, more developed players or older players, it's essentially was brought in to stop that you can't use them as an extra player just to keep possession. But yeah, the outcome is, like you say, that then the keeper's going to receive it less than they might. So yeah, that's true, and that's the trade-off, like I say, of these different constraints and outcomes. Who else is it? Sharon, you were Sharon? Is it Louise then who hasn't?
I think there might be legacy hands. If I'm wrong, folks, but
I don't know if I
trying to pop them down.
I've no idea how you put the hand down.
Just keep it up then. Don't get too tired. But me neither. I don't know if I can do it for you. It looks all cleanish now.
I think you just press it again the same as you do to raise it, but it should put it back down.
Great. This one we can probably jump over quicker because you seem really familiar with the general rules and constraints. I guess just comparing it to fluffy ball five-a-side like we might have all played growing up when the ball pings off the walls. What do you think is the difference and the outcome of playing to lines compared to having it bounce off a wall? For example, if you misplace a pass. Sharon, does that hand back up?
Yeah, I think futsal is more like what they play outdoors than five-a-side kicking a giant tennis ball off walls.
I'm glad you say it like that with the same disgust that I do. And why? What's the difference then for a player in possession of the ball under pressure?
They just kick it off a wall to bounce it round somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than try to use the head and find someone to pass it to, or find a way of getting around the player more skillfully.
Exactly right. So that's a constraint that makes it more difficult, because if you misplace the pass, or if you were to try to do that, then the ball's out and you've lost possession. So you did right. It's going to challenge them to be more aware and be better with their decision making, which, in my opinion, those areas are some of the strongest benefits or challenges of this game, rather than just lots of touches in a small space. They've got to be aware and perceive and choose quicker and solve those problems together than just lots of little touches in a small space. So I'm definitely with you on that. So combined with that small space and these constraints, what might be the difference if we played with a bouncy football in a sports hall? Again, feel free to throw it in the chat or to I'll jump in.
Yeah, well, the ball wouldn't be at your feet for most of the game. I know we play five-a-side every Monday, and the ball just keeps getting hoofed up, and there's no one with the ball at the feet, so there's no development there.
Yeah, and it's frustrating. I'm certainly not good enough to control a football in a tight space. Growing up in New Zealand in PE, the closest we had to futsal was 3 high jump mats spread out anywhere on the court, and if anyone was close with or without the ball, you could rugby tackle them onto this mat, and somehow there's a bouncing, a football pinging off everywhere. And equally back there in the sports centre I used to work in, which was a big 12-court, incredible venue for all sports, the only professional football team in the country, the Wellington Phoenix, when they came in the doors to train and they used a football, and as much as I would have liked to go down there and give my strong little opinion as the little futsal purist, they were good enough to control a football in a tight space, and they could pass and receive it and kill it dead. But you're right. So for most of us, it's not the right tool for that environment. And to throw, I guess, a misconception out there, because it's easier to control in that tighter space, I think then players can start perceiving and choosing quicker, which means getting their eyes up before, during, and after receiving the ball, which research shows happens a lot more with players exposed to futsal. But then I would argue that doesn't necessarily make you a more skillful player, because a football's harder to control because it's bouncier. So that really delicate touch, if you think of receiving a football that's been blasted in, with a bit of ball speed, and you have to finesse it to really kill it. A futsal ball, you don't need to do that as much, because if you have just a clean surface behind it drops quite well for you. So I think that's almost a misconception sometimes, that a futsal ball isn't a magical thing that's going to make people more skillful necessarily. And I'd argue because it's easier to control, then you can, like I say, see and choose, perceive and decide the next action. But to control a football, they also need to to practice controlling the football in different environments. Right, I'll jump to the next. The surface. So I guess the question down the bottom throws it out there. So like I almost said then, a futsal ball is not the magical solution to all of football's problems. What would the outcomes do you think be of using a futsal ball on a 3G, like a modern 3G, either indoor or out? So if we used a futsal ball on a non-futsal surface, so generally futsals, a flat wooden type surface where we play basketball and other sports. Sharon is typing. Feel free to throw your comments in the chat again.
I'm just unmuting myself. It's easier. It wouldn't roll right. It wouldn't move the way it was intended to move.
Mm-hmm. And how's it intended to move?
Fast.
Exactly. So because there's a nice smooth surface, it allows us to move the ball a lot faster, and because it's easier to control, then they can handle that ball speed better. Yeah, definitely agree with that. Obviously it's flatter and just smoother, so you can play at a higher tempo for sure. So that generally was the overview of those different laws of the game. So the goal being, I guess the main one is more narrow, if that's the right word, and how then the players have to be, more aware and smarter about how they manipulate and open up space. And sometimes that means that it's not all straight down the middle. And like was said really well earlier about manipulating where the keeper is and being aware of that and arriving on the back post and for cutback options, which, as I said, you see a lot of in football too. When it's beautiful to watch, isn't it? When passes they're cutting into the right spaces. Some of those laws of the game, which, sometimes they feel quite pesky, I think. And then I guess it's important just to know what that threshold or understanding is, because, for example, with a kick-in, it can seem very pesky if the ball's over the line a little bit, or if they step on, or if it's rolling a little bit. But there has to be a line somewhere as well, as in how far. Then if we allow it a little bit in, then where's the next line, and then it becomes half a meter, and then they're drop kicking it in. So hopefully with the just the consistency and understanding when you start a game with how those things will be applied, that will help your players. The playing area itself, obviously, being, well, for them maybe it's not too much smaller than outdoor football, but it would be somewhat smaller and playing to lines. As you rightly said, it's more of a ruthless constraint, because they'll find out pretty quick that they can't just smash it down the field and hope for the best, or they can't just try and bounce it off a wall, a misplaced pass that goes out. They've lost possession. So that ruthless constraint creates obviously a challenging environment for them, which we need to help, because they'll get less success than they used to, which can be hard for them. But like was said in one of those answers earlier, I think the word was about panic with the kicking, because that constraint's ruthless and it's difficult for them. That's how they're learning and improving. So if we can emphasize that and help them through that in a positive way and let them solve those problems, then they'll get better or more aware or have different technical skills in the locker as well. And as you said, the ball's easier to control, which feels like the right level for that environment, because most of us, and it's almost frustrating after you've seen your young people play futsal in that environment and be able to put together a few passes, it's quite frustrating if you go and try and play or watch something different. And in my daytime work, which is in secondary schools and the foundation, some indoor sessions I've seen with the run with the football, and it's been really interesting to just watch and count how many passes were made each time a player or a team won possession. And with one of them, it was less than 10% of the time that they received the ball, they made 2 or more passes, which meant that often with a football in a wooden sports hall, which meant that most of the time they made 1 pass at best, or they made 0 passes. So they were either tackled or passed the ball out, or it got intercepted. And then when it changed to a futsal ball, it happened more than 50% of the time. So I think that was incredible, and you almost need to see the numbers if people haven't seen the difference of using a futsal ball in that environment. And then, as you rightly said, the hard surface lets us play the game quicker, and I think it's an argument or a trade-off that doesn't necessarily mean they have an amazing finesse touch, because we're making that easier because the ball's easier to control. Then it means that they can perceive and be aware before, during, and just after they receive the ball, and then learn to take those decisions quicker as well. And then hopefully it'll feel like they have more time when they get back into football environments, with, I guess, the added challenge of having to have a softer touch on a football. But again, this is the beautiful thing about it, and within coaching as well, when you have sessions and you change constraints and you see what the outcomes are, and might make one thing easier or happen more or less, to see another thing happen more or less as well. And that's just the quick summary as well. Kick-ins, keeper, rolling unlimited substitutions. Again, it's up to the leagues about how exactly that's managed, but for the sake of keeping the game going, it's a lot easier if you can do your substitutions when your team has possession of the ball, for example, of a set piece. So if you've won a kick-in, instead of going and picking up the ball and the referee counting, you can just ask your players to come off then. And sometimes, depending on numbers, if you've got quite a few subs, and if there's enough that there's 2 sets of 4, sometimes I'll find it a lot easier to manage just 2 sets of 4 who, play 5 minutes or whatever it is on and off. And then you can talk to them on the sideline and give them a little challenge and go set them off on their way. And the same when the others come off. And that foul count, which you said doesn't seem to be a major issue, or there's no need to apply penalties for those multi-fouls during a game from one team. And again, down the bottom, the age appropriateness is important, because futsal probably gets it wrong sometimes. Just like in these modern times, we don't put 9-year-olds on an 11-a-side football pitch. Some of the size and the rules and the considerations for younger people should be taken into account and be a bit different. Hopefully there's a nice little sum up video that you can hear. Great. So there's some slight differences there, isn't there? With most times it's not practical to have a stop clock because you don't know how long the game will be. But yeah, for the most part, it stands true, and it's nice to hear actually how aware of a lot of the constraints and laws you are, because sometimes I guess I don't know, tweaks or changes, if there's a lot of them or not enough of them, sometimes it comes away and starts looking not so much like futsal, which isn't a bad thing. But it sounds like you guys are creating a really genuine experience for your young players, which I think is pretty unique as well. I know, like I say, in Manchester, I'm not sure it's as practically possible to do it, and it's because it seems so synced in up there, which is nice. So next, I just want to delve into a little bit of, because of those constraints, what does it mean for the, I guess, the challenges that our players are going through, which you've brought out and made some good points on already. And then what does that mean for us as coaches or the adults on the sideline, and how we can support them best through that. So I guess 2 questions there. We'll do the first one. Given these constraints, compared to football, how much information do you think a player is trying to perceive and process and decide and act when in possession? So if we think from the player's point of view, if they've in possession of the ball in a game of futsal, with the tighter space, with defenders, with outlines, with these different rules, what do you think is going through their head first of all when they're in those situations? Feel free to throw in the chat or throw up your hand. And you may not think it's overly different to football, and maybe it's not. Blind panic. And it is, it's intense, and like I said, I think there's something about the constraints are more ruthless. If you lose possession, often in futsal, it means that the other team's attacking your goal, which is more obvious. It's more shameful to have made that mistake. So I think we need to bear that in mind with how we communicate and look after our players. It feels like they feel more pressure and can rush and make rash decisions. Where do you think that pressure comes from?
I think they put it on themselves. I think the era's talking about it's a fast game, it's a pacey game.
Yeah.
Limits on how quickly they've got to take kick-ins and distribute the ball. Certainly I found in our first 2 games this weekend with 2 different teams, it just felt as if players that were normally quite relaxed and in control just were a bit panicked, and I had to say to them a few times, look, there's no pressure, you don't have to rush, just do it and think about what you're going to do before you do it, but you don't need to panic and do everything as quick as humanly possible. But it's definitely self-imposed, I think, with the younger kids.
Yeah, which I think is a really important consideration, isn't it? If it's sometimes it looks a little bit negative, like pressure, it can come out like that, but ultimately it's because they want to do well and compete and do their best and win as well, because they're competitive. So it shows that they don't need us to provide them or throw or shout motivation at them and transfer it to them as if that was magically possible. It shows that they want to do all those things, and that they want to compete and do their best and show what they can do. What else? Loads of scanning and panicking. Definitely agree. And again, just the constraints of the game will mean that over time they'll figure out and see that they'll have to look around more, and they might try different parts of the foot as well. Coach and the parents, I agree that was probably in response to sometimes when asked where pressure might come from. our under-8s last year didn't enjoy it as they felt spectators were too close. Yeah, and it's an interesting consideration, Marta. What was it about the spectators close that they didn't like? Do you know?
Sorry, I'll unmute myself.
Thank you.
Some of the girls, they did enjoy it, don't get me wrong, because they scored more goals. However, some of the players, the more shy girls, they did not like it because they felt as if spectators were part of the teams, that they heard them on the sidelines, especially when near the bench, they heard them talking. Even, I'm not saying even like criticism or anything like this, but like hearing people in the background actually created extra distraction as well. So that's all.
Yeah, and then that's the consideration, isn't it? If, like you guys said, there's more rules, there's more not pressure, but more, closer distance to defenders, so there's more pressure on the ball. They've got these different rules and laws to try and grapple, and then the constraints with just the environment. The spectators are a lot closer, like you say. It's a hall where often it echoes and the sound amplifies. It's an interesting consideration, isn't it? So if that's the challenge that they have, how helpful can anything we say be for them, especially when they're in possession? And then also sometimes even just their presence. So even if there was less shouting and instructions, still sometimes the parents can have different effects on their children, and that's not even necessarily anything bad that the parent's doing, but just because the child wants to please their parent and have their approval. So when I coach in the girls' RTC, the parents are on the outside of the sports hall, but there's one window that's about almost not as big as this room. It's probably 3 meters wide. So the parents are all huddled in there trying to see their girls during training, and we have a games day once a month. But it's quite telling sometimes. I find that even in a warm-up game, some girls will look to their parents after they've done something good, or if they think they've made a mistake, and often their eyes will go up to their parent on the window, and that just tells me that I don't think they feel that free. I'm not sure exactly the reason that they have to look up to their parent. Is it to see them, I don't know, confirm that they disapprove that their girl lost possession or didn't shoot here or didn't do that? So yeah, the closeness of that all makes that more challenging for them, I think. Are there any of the sports halls possible for spectators to be upstairs or behind a window? Do you know?
The ones we played last year, they were all sports halls, but there wasn't facility really for parents. So I had a bench on the side, which was very close to the lines.
Yeah.
Or some of the parents were asked to stand on the corridor and look out through the door.
Yeah, which is obviously it's challenging for them as well, and it's difficult because it's just the nature of the sports halls. Sometimes there's only less than a meter between the line and the wall, so if there's spectators there as well, there's almost the safety consideration there too, isn't there? If players are competing for the ball and they're jostling and between shoulders, one gets put over balance, then it could be into a spectator. Yeah, which is normal, isn't it? That these sports halls, they're not made for spectators, but naturally parents want to watch as well. So there's no easy solution to that either. I think I saw a really interesting video on this. So we've had some workshops for the girls and the coaches around working with parents in sport and how best to support, in their case, these girls that train 3 times a week and have a game every weekend all around the place. And there was a video that they showed of boys of about 14 years of age, and the captain with the team stood behind him. He talked to the parents and he said, these are the things we've been working on in training this week. For example, playing out from the back. So these are the things we're working on today, and we really want to learn and try. These are the ways that we like it when you support us and say these things from the side. And these are some of the things that don't make us feel good. These are some of the things that you say that don't make us feel good and at certain times, and it's hard to argue with when it comes from the children. And it's really interesting that actually if we step back and just ask them what their ideal match day experience looks like, what they would say and how different that might be to our perception, because my dad was no different growing up, and I can like literally hear his voice in my head late in games telling me to dig in and run harder when I was, I don't know, just some little kid. And of course I was trying my best. So of course I was. So you don't need that necessarily. Sometimes it's not helpful, as if it feels like more pressure when you're trying your best in difficult circumstances. So it's a really interesting consideration that, like you said, when the parents are closer in that tight environment, it becomes more apparent. And to be honest, I think it can be a real challenge for coaches if you're the one leading the team on the match day. Some parents out of love will be more vocal and louder and more supportive and trying to will their child on through volume and frequency of using their voice. So it's a challenge for you guys to juggle as well. But if we've got the player at the heart of that, and like I said, if it's possible to ask them and get their input on it, then I think I think most adults will be on board with what the kids ask for. And then another one on that is generally, and it's just about black and white, that with the girls in the academy when coaching, and the same on a match day, when they're in possession of the ball, we're discouraged to speak to them as the coach from the sideline. Why do you think that might be, and how might the difference be to their decision making between if the coach isn't helping them with giving them information and direction in that time when they're trying to make the decision? Why do you might think it might be a different approach to keep quiet for the player with the ball? Sharon, has that hand up?
Yeah, because they need to make decisions themselves, and if you're shouting instructions, it confuses them and they go with what you want rather than what they're thinking of. Try something new.
Exactly. And because it's at the same time when they're trying to perceive and make decisions, to then interrupt that thought process, maybe it might be stressful and they're trying to block you out and concentrate, but for them to interrupt and switch and listen to you and perceive and understand what you're saying and then try to act on that to appease you, it's slower anyway to be able to execute that. So yeah, I agree entirely that it would be more of a struggle and they might make more mistakes, but they're learning how to perceive and solve these problems and make the decisions for themselves. Definitely. Yeah, so those were just some of my thoughts around that and what might be helpful is if you can ask the children either in a group or if it's an online thing that they submit. I did a Coach CPD last Monday night with a coaching group with the Manchester FA, and two of the coaches on this program brought in their under 10s, and we had a session with them where we combined them all together. And I was really like, we asked some similar questions: why they're there, what do they think is a good coach, what do they like about their coach. And I was fascinated and surprised to learn that almost all of them mentioned the idea of being challenged, making mistakes, and the referee helping them and guiding them. I didn't necessarily talk about when, so it wasn't about being talked at when they're on the ball, but they all wanted to learn and master the game, which I thought was interesting, more so than just winning or just having fun. children enjoy mastering skills and feeling progress and competence like we all do. But without asking them or any people that we work with, I think that's where friction can happen. If we want two different things, if we want to, I don't know, play too seriously or win at all costs or play a certain style, maybe they want to learn different things and learn when to run with the ball as well, for example. But it's really interesting and really empowering if we can bring their voice out a little bit more and I guess have that affect how we serve them. And like I said, maybe the agreement word is an impossible dream, but the more understanding we have, say, before a game about what the best way to support and challenge our players is, then we have a better chance, I think, than if we don't talk about it and we come in with different perceptions, as everyone will, and different experiences around what that might look like, because often we'll just do what we had growing up because that's all we know, and so that's what we think it is. So without those discussions, and tonight's a great example of you guys jumping on and putting an input and throwing considerations both ways, that's the only way to learn and get better and come at things differently. That's some gameplay from the Futsal Champions League. So that's Barcelona, their professional futsal team. But have a look at some of the movement before and after the ball. So before and after players receive the ball. And how it compares to playing direct and fast, or if they're trying to solve certain problems and unlock things. So as you can see, it's not... Oh, here's another one we'll jump straight into. So one was Barcelona versus Sporting, so two strong futsal clubs and nations. And the one we just watched was from England, from our national futsal series, so the men's league. What do you think? So do you think they're attacking forward 100% all of the time? What do you think? Especially that first clip. Go on, JP.
Yeah, so obviously the first clip was a lot more higher tempo. There was like a lot of movements away from the ball and back to the ball to like buy themselves that little bit of space. And then obviously it was, but that second one there was a lot slower, and obviously it was harder for them attacking.
Yeah. What's interesting about that as well, obviously we're also, one clip was these professionals who grew up in futsal environments, and the next is in England where we're evolving and growing our futsal culture. The first clip you said was more intense. The defence was actually sitting deeper and giving them more space and time on the ball. So it's really interesting that you're still seeing that the team in possession, and like you mentioned, the movement before and after the ball was deliberate and fast and sharp, and there's double movements to try and create space. That was sharper than the second clip, where actually the defending quite high up the court, so that it's not just what you do with the ball or necessarily the ball speed as well, what players do before the ball, before they receive, to create space to receive it, and then after to go and help again, is important, because if players stand still between it, then the space will close and defenders will close it. Let's watch the second clip again and have a look at the defending team, and just have a think if you think there's a set formation, and if you think there's set positions on the court that one's a striker and one's a centre back. So have a look and think if you think there's a really defined shape or formation that they're playing, and watch how they defend. What do you think? Was there what formation were they playing? What positions were there, and do you think there was a set shape?
I feel it was more of a 2-2-2 formation, but they did rotate. They didn't sort of stay in one position, so there was a bit of rotation round.
Yeah, and are you talking about the team in possession?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so like I say, rotation, so movement and switching positions. And then when you say 2-2 as well, that's the idea of just stretching the pitch, isn't it? We can visualize the height and the width. So then the idea of rotation in itself, I guess, shows the flexibility that we need to try and consider with positions, which can be hard for young players if they see that they're a defender and you're an attacker. But in a game of 4v4, they all need to contribute and be able to defend. And after an easy pass, a safe pass, and a forward movement, a player might go from the last player back in front of their own goal to being the highest player forward, which meant that in that 3 seconds, then, they've done different roles. What about the defending team? Do you think they had a set shape, and what was it?
Looked like there was 3. They came back when they lost the ball. They went back into the back 3.
You think that they had the defending team had 3 players at the back?
I think it was more of a diamond, like man to man.
Mm-hmm. And so that's interesting. So diamond and man to man. So if we were man to man and it looked like a diamond, what if that furthest player back in front of their goal in possession made a pass and drove forward, so ran forward up the court, and then was then the most advanced player? Would the diamond stay for the defending team? Or would they go with the player, do you think?
Can you even really have formations, or is it just a case of picking up the space where it's needed?
That's where I'm getting at. So it's hard because obviously in football we talk about shapes, but even if you take a snapshot of any football game at any time, especially if it's in at different times, the shape won't look perfect either. And there's obviously more lines of defence that you can have in football because the pitch is longer and there's more players. But it can be easier to consider the individual responsibility. So each of those players was behind the ball, which is a safer way to defend and not get caught too high with space behind. Of course, you can press high if you like to. But it was clear that each defender was behind a player and knew who they were responsible for. And then obviously this is, I guess, as they get older and there's more to think about, you can offer more cover behind the player who's pressing the ball. You can offer more cover in behind them to close central spaces and stop passes into more dangerous areas, while still knowing who your player is that you go out and engage. yeah, I agree. There's such a flexibility in the game that if we're too rigid and say we must be a diamond or a square, then if the movement changes, or if they start building up as a 3, and we've said that there's a square and we'll have 2 up top and they'll be in a flat line, then that might be quite easy to solve. But if we can get them thinking about the responsibility of knowing which player they defend, and then as a bonus you could challenge them. I'm not sure what the oldest players you would have, but you might be able to challenge them more to offer cover in certain areas and inside spaces, then you could do that. And then equally, the team in possession, they can think about that 1v1, and like you guys said with the previous clip, that movement before and after the ball. So when I've got the ball, can I be comfortable under pressure? And then when a safe pass comes around after I played it, then there's a 1v1 against my defender. Can I get behind him? And if I can, then I might be in and receive the ball. And then I've outskilled him, I've outsmarted him without the ball. And if not, and I move him, then there's the space for someone else to come and fill. So you're definitely right. The game's so flexible that I think it potentially it's confusing or restrictive to tell a player that they're only a centre back or a striker, because then if there's the right moment to go forward, then they can. So sometimes it's nice to think about roles, and whoever's furthest back might have to take that role, or whoever's highest up can stretch the court high when we win possession, for example. And then that makes them more well-rounded players as well. They need to be able to do all those things, and they're all going to receive the ball under pressure in this game, and they're all going to have opportunities to score a goal and to make that killer pass at the other end as well. Nice. I think we can still open up for questions as well, but what I'll do is I'll just throw this in the chat, and it's just a way for you guys to feedback and see what you liked and what you didn't like, and what you gained from today as well. And also I probably didn't mention at the start, but because Ray was so proactive and really onto it for reaching out and asking for support, England Futsal rolling out some new intro CPD support and material throughout the county FAs, but there's not going to be enough resource at the start for everybody. So because he was so, like I say, proactive and positive about it, that I guess couldn't not, I wanted to help and get involved. But then it's good to see how this material lands for you for this type of thing, because it's common that there be other leagues that want and need support in what futsal is, and not just the laws, but hopefully, like we've seen today, trying to be really deliberate about the challenges and the environment that we're creating for our players. So yeah, what I'm saying is your feedback and questions and what you liked and what you didn't like, if you're able to drop it into there, would be amazingly helpful, because it shows what's beneficial or not, and what helps you the most. And then I'm also keen, as things evolve and as you go on as well, to see how us we can support as well. And in general, their next steps, enjoy it, and guiding your players, like I say, new situations and challenges which are new for us as well. So I guess how we model our approach to new things and new challenges is important as a role model to the young people, to solve those problems and communicate and hopefully have some freedom to express themselves as well. Ray will be able to tell you more as details emerge, but like I said, he's really proactive in that space, and there'll be the Youth Futsal Cup, which you've done in previous years. Do you want to jump in on that at all, Ray? I know that the details aren't there yet with exact dates and things.
Yeah, so it's something we've ran in the county previously. Once it all comes out nationally from the FA, we'll look at how to best deliver that and hopefully offer a pathway to that Youth Futsal Cup like we did in the past. Yeah,
it's a shame some of yours, I think the youngest age is under 10 at the moment, but it's also what's exciting about things at the moment is that with this new group and new people, they're quite I don't know, reflective and open-minded to what works best. So in the past, it's been down to under 10. But what is that age range of all the different teams that are doing the futsal? Did you say it's up to 10 or maybe 12?
For the league provision, so
Yeah,
the
for
youth league
yours,
stuff. Yeah, Craig might be able to jump in here, but it's generally sort of entry level that we do. In girls, they've had a lot more experience of going up through the age groups, and we've been able to do more of the age groups throughout the county. Biggest challenge for us is actually a county-based facility. So we've used the Sand Centre previously, which has been perfect. It's had 2 courts alongside each other, but that one sometimes isn't always available. So it's a challenge to run a county-wide event like that. Craig, I know you want to jump in.
No, it's just more to add the again the context. Yeah, so we've had loads of successful years over the sort of last 10 years, as I've said, around delivering the county-based competitions. As football has grown, it has provided certain logistical challenges around, to basically live with the growth, if that's the right way to put it. We've had competitions where we've had girls only from under 10s through to under 16s. The boys' game has been really strong throughout that period as well from a football point of view, and the futsal provision has been more league based than competition based. If I'm honest, some teams have entered separately and gone on that sort of futsal journey, but it has been something that we've done sort of sporadically in that sense. Last few years we haven't done anything, just purely for facility availability and logistical reasons. The other thing we're very mindful of is not stepping on league program tours as well. So leagues have got extremely busy programs. There isn't that much wiggle room in there to get sort of prolonged competition dates in there. So we try and be mindful of that as well. And for this season in West Cumbria, we have under 7s through to under 10s mixed playing futsal, under 7 girls through to under 10 girls playing futsal. In Carlisle, it is under 7s and under 8s mixed and girls, and in Penrith we have under 8s playing futsal as well. So it's very much an entry level / mini soccer, provision from a county perspective.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, those are typical problems, aren't they? Just the venues is a big one. I got off a call earlier today with a group down in London with who local funders and things. There's an outdoor space under a motorway, so it's quite urban and looks like a FIFA type game. And they've got a surface laid down there and some funding and things. So yeah, it's definitely a challenge.
If it was just the players, Matt, then I think reasonably you could look at hosting something. I think that some of the additional challenges that we have are around the travel that we have in our county, the location. Some people can travel an hour and a half to a location if you did a county-based competition. I think having to cater for parents and spectators and all of the sort of whole package that would go with an event like that does take a lot of consideration. But we'll obviously we look at it every year and we try our best to do what we can.
Yeah, I'll check in and just give an early heads up with kind of direction or how it's looking as well. But yeah, it's a big challenge with one court venues is very restricted with obviously how much you can do and how many teams you can provide for on a day.
Yeah.
So definitely a typical challenge, that one, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And it's probably good to mention as well Carlisle Futsal Club, right?
Yeah, and just on that note, I don't know if you're aware, but one of those pictures on the slides was from one of our previous events, girls one, I think, from the Sun Centre. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but
I did try to look, but there weren't many. So yeah, I did look up.
Yeah, no, that's great. So yeah, Carlisle Futsal Club. We have previously delivered some really great stuff with them. I know it's on Ben, our CEO's radar, just to get back in touch with those guys, because they've actually delivered some fantastic CPD follow-ups for us in the past. That might also be, depending on the willingness from them, that might be something that we do as a follow-up to this, because this has been a great sort of overview and much appreciated. But yeah, working with them, and if any players, for instance, in some of the grassroots clubs are really keen to do it, then yeah, we'd definitely signpost them through there where it's more specific based provision for that for futsal.
Yeah. And yeah, that's so good. He wrote a really good article a few years ago about how to develop a futsal club, that I'll be checking in with him on that, because we're looking at building some CPD around that, around those that are in that space where, you know, they've got this growing thing and they want to grow a club. There's nothing wrong with inflatable goals to solve a problem when they're cheaper and more portable. I used to, way back in New Zealand more than 10 years ago, I used to have this big old rickety full-size futsal nets that would, you know, my passenger's seat would have to be down, and they'd only just fit in inflatable goals that go up in 2 minutes. A lot lighter and easier than that is.
And they fall down halfway through a match. We have to have a parent standing blowing them up constantly.
I actually forgot about those, Sharon. I'll be honest.
Those were the days.
They were
that was part of the fun, Sharon. If I'm honest, it was.
Yeah, I like to think futsal people, on a futsal budget, have to solve problems in different ways and be creative too. This is one of the questions that came in. We'll see, I guess, roughly if things have been covered much during the night. What are the genuine benefits of futsal at grassroots level when trying to teach kids one game, but for half a season you play a different game? I think I used this quote in response, this cheeky quote earlier as well, about that idea of do what you've always done, get what you've always got. So it can be, I guess, difficult for young players to come in and have different rules, so that consistency or agreement before games and the understanding, you guys jumping on a call to understand more about it, is helping them a lot. But like we said earlier, if we can help them through that panic and the struggle and having different decisions and challenges, then they'll be better for going through that process and being resilient and being open-minded to differences and, you know, different challenges. And then I'm confident enough to think that if they do play it consistently over 2 or 3 months, or, you know, a few consecutive experiences, then they will get more comfortable on the ball. They will get better at looking and perceiving space and solving those problems, which I kind of said below there. And yeah, you guys are creating a really unique opportunity. I think it's not as common and accessible in most places around the country as it is with what you're all, you know, working together to provide. So there's loads for them to learn and adapt off that, and then hopefully as things evolve, and like you said, with Carlisle Futsal Club and with the developing youth national competitions and the pathway to, you know, there's England under-19 futsal team, for example, who went to Italy last year, I think it was, to try and qualify for Euros. So who knows, in the future, you know, there'll be a pathway there, and there'll be some that's another pathway, because not everyone can or does make it in football. And I'm an example of that off the court as well. I wouldn't have been able to work with, you know, the best girls at one of the biggest clubs in the world in their football program, or jump on a call like this if it wasn't for this little game of futsal that I guess captured my imagination early, and I was really curious about and engrossed myself in. So yeah, difference is is good, I think. Ray, is there any nice way closing statements or any other questions, I guess, as well?
I think just first of all, I just wanted to return the thanks, Matt, just for being really proactive with us. Because I know for us it's time sensitive where we want to get these futsal conversations started, with it us starting over the winter period. So I really appreciate you basically putting something together and being considerate of the local context and some of the challenges that the coaches specific to this area have. And I think collectively as coaches, we've got a real opportunity to sort of use it all as a positive, whether it's a challenging experience or any sort of experience can help the kids within your team and yourselves as coaches grow. I think that's the real opportunity, and put you in different environments. I think it can only be positive, really. Basically just in terms of the CPD offer and moving forward, I just wanted to point out we do have another couple of online sessions planned for over the winter. I know a lot of the people on the call have already signed up to Coaches Community or things like that and been on previously. We'll be getting messages out about that. And those who have fed back on our Coaches Community that we're going to start up, we're going to be sending out links to access that. We're going to have a bit of a community on WhatsApp potentially, that sort of thing. So yeah, just really appreciate your time, Matt, and if anyone else has any thoughts, feel free to let us know.
Yeah, and I'll just throw that link up again as well for any feedback on tonight. And also, I think it's on my next slide, there's the other, there's an online intro and different resources and things as well. So we can send that off as well. But Ray, I think you're exactly right that there's a real opportunity there for what you've grown and developed, and giving these young people the gift of futsal so early to try it and see if they like it, which I'm sure many of them will. I said I'd show that. You wanted to see that view, didn't you?
I did, yeah. It's still lit up.
Yeah, it's raining pretty heavily. I don't know if you can hear it.
Yeah. Wow. The Theatre of Dreams, or what was formerly known as the Theatre of Dreams, anyway.
The school's been recorded, so
yeah, I'm not jealous of your office at all, I'll be honest.
There's worse places to do late nights, isn't there?
Yeah, amazing. No, but I just want to finish by thanking everybody again. We'll send out any resources that Matt sends. There's obviously a full journey in terms of coaching courses that you can go on, which is futsal specific, level 1, level 2. I know if John's still on the call, he's got his level 2, that sort of thing. But yeah, really appreciate your time. Anything at all following this that you have questions or anything, feel free to drop us a line. But thanks everybody. Enjoy the rest of your evening.